there, my thrifty family. Ken here, your thrifty apprentice. Happy Wednesday, everyone, and welcome back to another thrifty review. In today's quick review, we are going to be taking a look at the Caran Dache Gouache Studio 12 tube set, and we will also be talking a little bit about the Stay Wet Gouache palette that I purchased to go along with these paints at the time. Now, per our usual in-depth reviews, per our usual quick reviews, we are going to cut off into a demo so that you will have an opportunity to see the paints in use one final time before we jump into a detailed review. In this demo, I wanted to take time to get in one more outside style painting since we have finally wrapped up plein air April. I will continue to paint outside during the rest of the spring and hopefully all of the summer as well. For this composition, I took inspiration from the cover of this watercolor block I am painting on, which is a new to me paper. I am trying to work on my landscapes from different perspectives, and I wanted to give something new a try. To start, I grabbed a dagger and began by painting in the focal rock area. For the base, I'm using a mixture of ultramarine and burnt sienna to make a dark. I added water so that the first layers on the rocks would be light. I will be building color by layering as things dry. Now, this testing period for the Caran Dache Studio Gouache set also included me testing out this Stay Wet Travel Gouache palette. I cannot think of the brand right off the top of my head, but I have to say it is amazing. It, without a doubt, did exactly what it claimed it would do. It has kept this gouache that I panned up during the unboxing video weeks back wet and workable. I am actually really impressed with this product and would definitely recommend it to anyone looking for a really good gouache palette to travel with, especially if you don't want to travel with your tubes. As I continue to build the composition, you will see me glazing different shades of green just to slightly work them into the color scheme versus completely covering what's under it. In really watery washes, you can glaze with gouache. However, I would encourage you to not expect it to be the same as glazing with watercolors. Watercolors are naturally more transparent, making them a better candidate for the technique. As I move into painting the landmass in the foreground, I started with the yellow ochre and burnt sienna as the contrasting color. My plan was to put the washes down in really juicy, heavy pigment washes so that I could drop salt into them. This would give me texture in the area that would emulate sand. However, you will see that I decided to take it in a different direction as the painting progressed, painting a dark base and adding more of a rocky feel to the extreme foreground. Now, this technique for painting the sky is one I picked up from Christy Rice. I normally start my skies at the very top of the paper, adding my mask color and then working it down towards the horizon as the paint runs off of the brush. Adding more water is needed. With this technique, the sky is actually started at the horizon and then carried up towards the top of the paper. This gives more color towards the horizon and less as you move upwards. This gave me more of a misty, moody feel to the overall painting, well, in my opinion. Honestly, it's not a bad technique. Not one that I would use all the time, but definitely I'm going to have to, work it into my regular painting routine. I also dropped really watery washes of the white gouache into the sky just to give it some space and a little cloud emulation. The gouache in this set, or should I say the white gouache in this set, isn't as opaque as, say, like the whites that I have used by companies like Turner or Holbein, or even Artwell Jelly Gouache for that matter. However, it does cover and can be used to brighten up many different aspects of your painting. Next, I'm jumping into laying down the base layer of the water. Using the cobalt and the ultramarine blues that were included in the sky to maintain color harmony, I am simply applying the paint in a horizontal back and forth motion to help emulate waves and to give the water movement. If you want to keep your water still, just paint a flat wash. I also added many layers to the water as the composition progressed to build more color depth and complexity. This is going to help me relay the time of day I was trying to convey as it combines with the lightness of the sky. At this point, I have moved into adding more detail to the focal rock area. I learned a long time ago that charging in with my darkest of darks first, combined with the white of the paper, helps me to see my midtones more clearly. Now, that might not work for every artist, but it has done wonders for me being able to see values as I build my compositions. As I work through the painting, you will see me use a series of dots and dashes to add into the shadow area of my focal rock. This is going to add texture and maybe even leave one with the impression that there are trees or shrubs of some type attached to the mask. I am trying really hard throughout this year to try out new techniques that I have not used in the past to see if they can be incorporated into my regular painting style. The only way to grow is to know. That happens to be something that I encourage all artists to give a try. Try a new technique every other time you paint. Decide what you like to keep and what you might pass up because it doesn't work all that well for you. As you start to practice these different things, you will see progression in your painting style before you know it. Now, with that said, I'm going to phase out, letting music finish up this demo, and I will see you all on the other side for a detailed look at the Caran Dache Studio Gouache Tube set. So let's start with the actual Stay Wet palette. Really quickly, this is very straightforward. It is a palette that comes with its own traveling water cup that you can expand and put water in for rinsing as you paint on the go. This is the perfect little design, in my opinion, for a traveling gouache palette because the lid snaps on really securely, right? And once you lift the lid, there's a mixing area on the inside for you to mix your paints. And then there is like a silicone sealing that is turned into a lid that divides off into the shape of each wheel. And it goes down into each one of them, maybe a little bit over 1/8 of an inch to really seal it down. Now this gouache was panned into this travel palette in the unboxing, which I will be sure to link because we won't go through an unboxing in this video due to the fact that it's already been done. But these were panned at that point, and without a doubt, they have stayed completely wet and moist. I have absolutely no issues going in there and using them in their like from the tube form. And this has definitely been a matter of 3 weeks to a month that we're talking about, maybe even a little bit longer. So I think that this palette is a super good investment, and I will be throwing the price of it out when I get to telling you guys the price of the paints, because honestly at this very second I do not remember how much I paid for it, and I will check, but you won't know. But yeah, so but even with the cost, I think it's like 15 bucks maybe, but it is so worth it. I think it is an exceptional little idea and palette. It comes with a strap that you can throw across your shoulder that clips here and here. It's really cool. So definitely a recommendation if you are into gouache, or even if you're into watercolor and you want to you know, put some tube paint in there and you want to keep it wet because you like painting from wet paints instead of dried down paints. It would even work for that. Just anything you want to keep wet, I think is really cool. All right, so here we have the Caran Dache Studio Gouache 12 tube set. I'll start off by saying that based on the information that's presented with this set, I would put it in the student grade classification. Now let's move on from there. The information that's presented on the belly band that surrounds the tin was gone over in the unboxing video, so you can just source that video if you would like to see the unboxing. I will say that the tubes are not your standard gouache tubes. You know, your standard gouache tubes from your legacy companies, your big name companies, are probably somewhere around 15 milliliters. These are 10 milliliters a piece in comparison, so I would say that they are smaller tubes. They are aluminum based, if I had to guess, and you do not have to puncture the top of the tube in order to get to the paint. When it comes to the consistency of the paint with the panning, I did not find that a lot of them had binder paint separation. I do believe I had to, I shake all of them anyway, but I just do believe I may have experienced that separation in maybe one or two, but not the complete set. The set does come with a brush, which in all honesty, I did not use. But again, I have done the pull test several times over on it, and it has not lost any of its bristles or hairs. So, you know, I would say it's your pretty run-of-the-mill basic brush that could be used to paint with if you needed to. Especially if you was just like, well, I would say painting on the go, but that's a pretty large brush. So, anywho, had a couple of things included in it that really didn't give too many details. I will say the package nor the tubes contain any pigment information nor any light fast information. So with that, it again pushes me to put the set into a student grade category. Now, we will get to the pigment numbers in just a moment because I was able to source those, and I'll tell you how. But outside of that, that's the complete presentation of the packaging and the tubes. You could remove the plastic molding if you wanted to in order to use the tin for something else, which is probably what's going to happen with me. Now, I progressed from there into painting, or should I say swatching the gouache. And the swatching of a product can be the introductory and the door opening, if that's how you want to put it, to a lot of insight into how that particular product is going to work. During the swatching of this, I came to realize something really quickly, that for gouache, this is a super transparent medium. It is. A super transparent product, I'm sorry. It really caught me off guard how non-opaque the gouache was. Now, that's not to say that in a gouache set you're not going to have some colors that are more transparent than others. But in this particular set, overall, I feel like all of the colors, including the ones that should be like naturally opaque going into your earth tones, are pretty transparent. The white did not carry much opacity. It's probably more of a mixing white. And the black, for all its use, it's okay. Now, they do dry with your standard matte finish, but because they are less opaque than gouache that I'm typically used to, that matte finish doesn't dry with as much of a gouache luster, so to speak, as I typically look for. Now, I did do my normal layering, swatching when I did these. I used the Paint Crush stamping set in order to lay down my swatch patterns, which I'm going to be doing for all of the products that I swatch in the future. I just find those stamps absolutely whimsical and comical, and I love creating little pages with them in order to, liven up my swatches some. With that being said, as you can see, some of the colors, you cannot even really tell I attempted to layer them, as you can see in some of the other colors. And I just found that to be really odd, in all honesty. And it leaned more so towards, what I'm saying about the paints being a little bit more transparent. And it's just something that's kind of outside the norm for a gouache, especially one that you would get in a tube under a legacy name. Excuse me. With that being said, that's not to say that the gouache can't be painted with, because it absolutely could, and we're going to get to that in a moment. I did do some color mixing with the gouache. They mixed to make pretty decent colors, in all honesty. They really did. I used the primaries that are actually listed in the set for you, which makes it easier to identify them, which I think is, is a pretty neat trick. And then here I just mixed colors together that I knew would neutralize each other in order to see the dark tone that I could make from a gray into a black. And all of those mixed together to make the pretty standard looking neutral, in all honesty. So got this sort of the same color for mixing those together. I used both a warm and a cool in separate, excuse me, color wheels. And in both sets, I was able to get really nice secondary colors that were recognizable, and for all intents purposes, they were what they were. But as I said, the paint is transparent, and the truth of the matter is, it seemed as if though they became even more transparent when you mix them together, and they carried a kind of really funny texture. So I did do a salt test, texture test for the paints in the actual painting demo, which you guys did get to see. Now, honestly, it did give some really nice texture to the painting originally, but it was my choice to take that foreground in a different direction. So I ended up covering the foreground where I had put the salt effect. If you remember from the demo, once I was covering it, you saw that I had to put down 2 layers of the burnt sienna in order to cover up that texture I created, which again wouldn't be the normal case with a gouache with the opacity that it's supposed to normally carry. I'm going to be very, very honest. This paint reminds me more of an opaque watercolor than it does an actual gouache. So, of course, I did a couple of paintings with it. And, of course, I'm not really tearing the gouache down because it can be painted with. If you guys recall, this one was done in the unboxing video. And when you use the gouache in really watery washes, you're using just one layer. You're not really trying to build layers or build color depth or complexity with the actual paint. I think it does okay, because I actually enjoyed this painting mainly because I like the final outcome effect more than I did in any of the other paintings that I attempted with the gouache. And here I actually used some Snow White water-soluble fountain pens in addition to the gouache. So it does work well in a mixed media atmosphere. The next thing that I painted was a full-time tutorial over on Patreon, a time-lapse here on YouTube where I used the daffodil as the focal image and then just painted some greenery around it. Now, this one didn't turn out too bad, and I wasn't completely displeased with it. I mean, I had to do a lot of layering in order to get to the opacity that I wanted or that I saw in my mind's eye when I originally started the composition. So sometimes you'll hear me say, you know, it didn't turn out the way I wanted it to. The painting may look okay, but that doesn't mean that was the original vision that I had in my head when I set out to do it. And I think a lot of us as artists are kind of like that to ourselves. So this turned out pretty decently. I mean, there are a lot of things I would change about it, including the fact that if I had to repaint this particular composition, I would probably do it with another gouache set because there were just certain areas that I wanted to be much more opaque than I could actually get it based on the way I wanted it to turn out when I originally set out to do it. But it turned out okay, and I was able to paint with the gouache, and for all it's worth, they can definitely be practiced with. Of course, there was the painting that we did in today's composition. The composition that we did in today's video, I'm sorry. And here again, I really was not able to get the final outcome that I wanted. And the more I was going through painting this particular demo, the more it kept hitting me that I felt like I had used some very similar paints before. Now, what I'm about to say is not to say that these two brands in any shape, form, or fashion are the same or that they're even being manufactured or produced by the same people. However, what I will say is that the formulation, in my opinion, based on use, seems to be really similar, all the way down to the way they look swatched. And those paints are Paul Rubens Opaque Watercolor Paint Set. Now, this is a 36 count of 15 milliliter tubes. So you get many more tubes and much more paint per tube in this set. But I just want you guys to just kind of take a look at this. And again, I'm not saying they're the same paints. I'm just saying I'm doing this in comparison to say that they remind me much more of an opaque watercolor than they do a gouache. So if you kind of take a look here, you're going to see some really very close colors in comparison to some of the colors that are in this set, all the way down to the way that they dry and the way that they look. Actually, I would probably say that these particular paints in some aspect are a little bit more opaque and layer better than the Studio Gouache set does. If you remember, I painted this little dessert, chocolate cup dessert here in the 2024 Mylar balloon painting. You can find both of those on the channel using the opaque watercolor. And I just think that they are so similar in texture, so similar in feel, the way that they kind of glide across the paper, the color mixtures, and more so the semi-opaqueness, semi-transparency of them. I mean, I just wanted to show you all those in comparison to the gouache so that you can see how transparent this particular set is for a gouache set. Now, with all that being said, the colors are, you know, bright and vibrant. It's a very mixable set. But I just don't think that you should walk into it expecting them to perform like your typical gouache. Now, I told you earlier, I was able to source the pigment numbers for the set because they are not provided by the company. Now, Sarah Burns has a blog in which she provides the pigment numbers for this set after emailing back and forth with Caran Dache and then finally releasing that information to her. Now, I had to be really careful because that information is included inside a review, and I wanted to make sure that I didn't read anything other than that little section about the pigment numbers, because I don't like for anybody else's opinion to really influence mine before I give a review, and then I kind of go see what everybody else said about it. I didn't used to be that way, but I'm so much that way at this point in my artistic career. So there you have that, guys. If I had to give the paints a star rating on a scale of 1 to 5, unfortunately, I have to say that these will probably fall at about a 3-star for me. Simply because I'm a little disappointed in the fact that they don't perform necessarily like the standard gouache. And with them being in a tube, and with them being from Caran Dache, who I've already admittedly said 100 times over, is no doubt my favorite professional art product company overall, as far as their pencil lines and just the things that they produce, accessories, pens, all that. But I was a little disappointed in the gouache set, I have to say. Even if it's going to be sold in the student market, there are so many other sets that I have tried that are on the student grade scale that I think just offer more opacity and mix and blend just as well as these do. So the paints are a whopping $49.25 for this 12 tube set. Now they do sell other sets, of course, but I honestly think that for basically $50, $49.25. So I'm rounding it up to 50. I honestly say for $50, 12 tubes are only 10 milliliters a piece for a gouache that is actually more transparent than it should be to be called a gouache. I'm not sure if in comparison to other sets at that range, especially other professional sets, that I would say they're worth it, not for that set. And even if you were to get one of the smaller sets, it means that you would be paying more per tube for the set than I paid for the 12. So, you know, I hate to say that they probably wouldn't be a set that I would just readily recommend. I still think that when it comes to tube gouache, right now, my ball still lies in the park with Turner. I still think that as of right now, and I haven't reviewed those gouaches yet, and I will get around to it, I promise. But right now, I haven't used, I'm not saying there's not one out there, but I haven't used a gouache to date that comes in a tube and is released by a legacy company, and you're expecting it to be of good quality, that I like more than Turner. But I still have other gouache over there that I haven't cracked open and tested yet, so who knows what's to come. Who knows what I'll say next, right? Trying a new product always. So there you have it, friends. I cannot wholeheartedly, in good consciousness, knowing what I know about the paint set, honestly say, run out and get it. If you want to do it, to test it, to try it, hey, go ahead. If you actually want a gouache that performs more like an opaque watercolor, and you don't have to really worry about the complete opacity, but to have a little opacity and a little transparency, then I say, hey, go for it. Maybe that will fit into your repertoire really well. But as for me and what I look for gouache, especially once I start to build the layers, I want something that's going to offer me a little bit more opaqueness. So hey, there you have it, guys. Oh, and I forgot to tell you guys the price of the palette. My bad. That was $13.99. I had to check to make sure. Yes, that was $13.99. So I paid $13.99. I think I got it like in 2, maybe 3 days after ordering it. It may have came quicker than that. And I think that it is worth more than $13.99 in all honesty. So to get it at that price, it's a steal. I'm going to definitely be linking both of the products in the video description, in case you guys want to check it out. All right, so there you have it. That wraps up everything. I don't necessarily recommend the paints. I definitely recommend the palette. And I hope you guys found something useful and helpful out of that information. If you did, please don't forget to give the video a little love and hit that thumbs up button. Share the video because sharing is caring. Jump in the comment section, guys. I really want to know what you think. How do you feel about this review? How do you feel about knowing what you now know about this gouache set? Because this was one that received a lot of the votes on the review redo video. So this was one that you guys wanted to see. So yeah, there you have that. So let me know how you feel. Jump in the comment section. If you've used them, let me know what you think of them. Did you have the same experience? Were they just as, you know, semi-transparent for you as they seem to have been for me? All right, check the video description for all of the relevant links. You can come join us over in the Facebook group. If you care to, you can definitely join us in the Thrifty Patreon community, which I need to go ahead and post what's coming up for Friday Night's Live, so you guys can make some plans for that. And you can also check out the Etsy shop and the most recommended product list. Thank you, guys. Remember, as I tell you, just keep creating.